Have you ever looked at someone and made an assumption about what they can or cannot do? Maybe you saw a person with a disability and thought their life must be limited. Maybe you judged someone by their job, their clothes, or the way they walk. We all do it. We're human. But sometimes in those rare and precious moments, someone comes along and shatters every assumption we've ever made. This is the story of Emma Martinez, a 32-year-old waitress with a prosthetic leg working at an upscale restaurant in downtown Chicago. On the surface, her story might seem ordinary, a single mother working long hours to make ends meet. But what happened one autumn evening at the Grand Oak restaurant will remind you that extraordinary talent and unbreakable spirit can hide behind the most unexpected faces. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about limitation, dignity, and the power of the human soul. The Grand Oak sits on Michigan Avenue, one of those establishments where the wealthy come to see and be seen. Crystal chandeliers hang from vaulted ceilings. White tablecloths are pressed to perfection. The menu doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you probably shouldn't be there. It's the kind of place where a steak costs more than some people make in a day. Emma Martinez has worked there for 3 years. Every evening she arrives at 4 o'clock, changes into her uniform, and prepares for the dinner rush. She moves through the dining room with practiced efficiency, balancing plates, refilling wine glasses, and offering the kind of polished service the restaurant is known for. Most customers barely notice her. She's part of the scenery, like the paintings on the walls or the flowers on each table. But some do notice. They notice the way she walks, the slight mechanical precision in her right leg, the barely perceptible difference in her gait. Emma wears black slacks that mostly hide it, but if you look closely, you can see the outline of the prosthetic beneath the fabric. Some customers glance away quickly, uncomfortable. Others stare. A few ask intrusive questions. Emma has learned to smile through all of it. She's a single mother to an 8-year-old daughter named Lily. Every morning before school, Lily asks the same question. "Mom, when are you going to play piano for me?" And every morning, Emma finds a reason to change the subject. The truth is too complicated to explain to an 8-year-old. The truth is wrapped up in pain loss and a dream that died 5 years ago on a rainy October night. Before the accident, Emma was someone else entirely. She had been a piano performance major at the prestigious Juilliard School in New York City. From the age of 6, music had been her language, her purpose, her identity. While other children played outside, Emma spent hours at the keyboard, her fingers dancing through Chopin, Rachmaninoff, and Debussy. By 18, she was performing in concert halls, earning scholarships, and being told she had the kind of talent that comes along once in a generation. Her professors predicted a brilliant career. Recording contracts, international tours, a name that would be remembered. Emma believed them. Music wasn't just what she did. It was who she was. Every morning, she woke up grateful that she had been given this gift. Every night, she fell asleep with melodies running through her mind. Then came October 15th, 5 years ago. Emma was driving home from a late rehearsal in Manhattan. The streets were slick with rain. She was tired, but happy, running through the performance in her mind, thinking about the spring recital that would showcase her senior thesis. She didn't see the truck that ran the red light, didn't have time to react. Just the sudden scream of metal, the explosion of glass, and then darkness. She woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed. Her mother sat beside her, eyes red from crying. The doctors explained as gently as they could. The crash had crushed her right leg below the knee. They had tried to save it. They had done everything possible. But the damage was too severe. Infection had set in. They had no choice but to amputate. Emma heard the words, but couldn't process them. Her leg. Gone. She was 26 years old, on the verge of everything she had worked for, and suddenly her body was different. Changed. Broken. But the worst news came later. Even after she learned to walk with the prosthetic, even after months of physical therapy, the doctors told her the truth about her career. Professional piano performance requires extraordinary control, not just in the hands, but in the feet. The pedals are essential. The sustain pedal, the soft pedal, the sostenuto pedal. They create the resonance, the depth, the emotional color of the music. And they require a level of fine motor control that a prosthetic leg simply couldn't provide. Not at the level required for concert performance. The Jules Hilliard Scholarship required full-time enrollment. Emma couldn't manage that from a hospital bed. She lost the scholarship, lost her place in the program, lost her identity as a pianist. She returned to Chicago to live with her mother and tried to figure out who she was supposed to be now. 6 months after the accident, she discovered she was pregnant. The father, a fellow music student she had been dating, wanted nothing to do with it. He was focused on his own career, he said. A baby didn't fit into his plans. Emma was alone, unemployed, living in her childhood bedroom with a prosthetic leg and a baby on the way. Lily was born on a spring morning. The moment Emma held her daughter, something shifted. The grief didn't disappear, but it found company. Purpose. This tiny human needed her to be strong, needed her to figure out how to survive. Emma found work as a hostess, then as a waitress. The Grand Oak paid well, and the tips were good. She could support herself and Lily. She could afford a small apartment. She could pay the medical bills that still arrived every month. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but it was a life. And Lily was happy. That was what mattered. But music haunted her. She heard it everywhere, in the rhythm of dishes being washed, in the melody of conversation, in the silence of her apartment late at night. Her mother had kept Emma's old piano, a beautiful upright that sat in the corner of her living room. Every time Emma visited, she avoided looking at it. The pain was too sharp, the loss too fresh. 5 years had passed, but it felt like yesterday. Every day, Emma woke up and put on her prosthetic leg. Every day she went to work and smiled at customers who barely saw her. Every day she came home to Lily and pretended that she was fine, that she didn't miss music so desperately it felt like a physical ache. She told herself she had moved on. She told herself that some dreams are meant to die. She told herself that she was lucky just to be alive to have Lily to have a job. And most days she almost believed it. It was a Thursday evening in late November when Marcus Rothwell walked into the Grand Oak. Emma was in the middle of her shift attending to a table of anniversary diners who wanted her opinion on the wine list. She didn't notice Marcus at first. She was too focused on her work on delivering the kind of service that earned good tips. Marcus Rothwell was exactly the kind of man who expected to be noticed. At 52, he had built a real estate empire that stretched across 3 states. His face appeared regularly in Chicago business magazines. He sat on boards, attended charity galas, and made donations large enough to get buildings named after him. He wore custom suits that cost more than Emma made in a month. His watch was a Rolex. His shoes were Italian leather. Everything about him screamed wealth, power, and privilege. He arrived with 4 associates, all men, all dressed similarly. They were loud from the moment they entered, their voices carrying across the dining room. They were celebrating something. A deal that had just closed. An acquisition that would make them all richer. They spoke in numbers that Emma couldn't comprehend. Millions. Tens of millions. Money that was abstract, theoretical, impossible. The host seated them at a large table near the center of the room. It was one of Emma's tables. She approached with her notepad and her professional smile. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Grand Oak. Can I start you with drinks?" Marcus looked up at her, and his eyes immediately went to her leg. Emma was used to it. She held her smile. "Scotch," Marcus said. "The 18-year, and make sure it's neat. Last time I was here, some incompetent server put ice in it." "Of course, sir. I'll make sure it's perfect." She took the other drink orders and headed to the bar. Behind her, she heard Marcus's voice not bothering to lower it. "Did you see that waitress? The one with the fake leg, Jesus? What is this place coming to? I pay premium prices and they've got cripples serving me." His associates laughed. Not loud, but enough. Emma's face burned. She kept walking. She had heard worse over the years. She had learned to let it roll off her back. But it never stopped hurting. It never stopped making her feel small. She delivered the drinks. Marcus barely acknowledged her. He was too busy talking about his latest acquisition, a historic building on the waterfront that he planned to demolish and replace with luxury condos. "The neighborhood's full of artists and bleeding hearts who think the building has historical value," he said, laughing. "They'll protest. They'll cry. And then I'll get my permits. And they'll have to watch their precious landmark turn into rubble. That's how business works. Sentiment doesn't pay the bills." Emma refilled water glasses, took their dinner orders, and tried to be invisible. It was a skill she had perfected. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant you didn't become a target. But Marcus seemed determined to notice her. Every time she approached the table, he found something to criticize. The water was too cold. The bread was too warm. His steak was overcooked by 30 seconds. His associates exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one challenged him. You didn't challenge Marcus Rothwell. Not if you wanted to keep your job. "Tell me something," Marcus said the third time Emma came to the table. "How does someone like you end up working here? I mean, with your condition." "Can't be easy." Emma kept her voice level. "I manage just fine, sir. Is there something wrong with your meal? I'm just curious." "What happened? Car accident? Industrial injury? Or were you born that way?" "It was a car accident, sir. Is there anything else I can get for you? Must be tough carrying all those plates around with only one good leg. What if you trip? That would be quite the disaster, wouldn't it?" He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Emma's jaw tightened. "I'm very careful, sir. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on my other tables." As she walked away, she heard Marcus's voice again. "Sensitive, isn't she? I was just making conversation." The Grand Oak had a grand piano in the corner of the dining room. It was a beautiful instrument, a Steinway that the owner had purchased at auction. Most evenings, a pianist named Robert played during dinner service. He was a conservatory student who performed tasteful jazz standards and classical pieces, providing elegant background music that enhanced the atmosphere without overwhelming conversation. But Robert had called in sick that evening. The manager, a kind man named Thomas, who had always treated Emma with respect, was stressed about it. The piano sat silent, covered in shadows. Several regular customers had commented on the absence of music. Marcus Rothwell certainly noticed. "What's wrong with the piano?" he called across the room to Thomas. "I come here for the ambiance. Dead silence isn't what I'm paying for." Thomas approached the table, apologetic. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Rothwell. Our regular pianist is ill. We tried to find a replacement, but on such short notice, that's unacceptable," Marcus interrupted. "I'm entertaining important clients. The experience is incomplete without music. This is sloppy management. Again, my sincerest apologies, sir. Your meal tonight will be complimentary, of course." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "I don't need free meals. I need competence." He gestured toward the piano. "You're telling me that in a restaurant full of staff, not one person can play a few simple songs. What kind of establishment are you running?" Thomas's face reddened. "I'm afraid piano performance requires specialized training, sir. It's not something just anyone can." "Even the crippled waitress could probably bang out a tune," Marcus said, laughing. His associates joined in, though their laughter sounded forced. "At least it would be entertaining." "We could watch her try to work the pedals with that robot leg." The comment cut through the dining room. Several nearby tables fell silent. Emma was at the bar picking up drinks for another table. She heard it. Everyone heard it. Thomas looked horrified. "Sir, I must ask you to be respectful of our staff. That kind of language is, 'Oh, please, I'm just joking around. Everyone's so sensitive these days.' Can't take a little humor." Emma set down the drinks. Her hands were shaking. The bartender, a woman named Grace, who had become a friend over the years, touched her arm. "Don't listen to him. He's just a rich jerk who gets off on making people feel small." Emma nodded. But the words had hit their mark. Robot leg. Even the crippled waitress. She had heard variations of this her whole life since the accident. From strangers. From dates who ghosted after finding out. From well-meaning people who spoke too loudly as if her physical disability meant she was also deaf or simple-minded. But this was different. This was public. In front of the whole dining room. In front of her colleagues. In front of dozens of witnesses who would remember the moment when Marcus Rothwell decided that humiliating a waitress was acceptable dinner entertainment. Thomas was still at Marcus's table trying to smooth things over. "Sir, I really must insist." "You must insist what?" "That I don't speak the truth." "Fine, I'll be politically correct. But the fact remains you have a piano and no one to play it. That's a failure of management." Emma returned to her section, mechanically delivering drinks and taking orders. But her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about the piano, about music, about the life she had lost, about 5 years of running away from the one thing she had loved most in the world. 30 minutes later, Marcus called Emma over to the table. His dinner was finished. His scotch glass was empty. He looked pleased with himself, the way men who have never been told no often do. "Another scotch," he said. "And tell your manager I want to speak with him. I have some suggestions for how he can improve this place." Emma nodded and turned to go, but Marcus's voice stopped her. "Actually, wait a moment. I'm curious about something." She turned back her professional mask firmly in place. "Yes, sir. You went to college, didn't you? I can tell. You're more articulate than most servers. I attended Juilliard, sir, for a while." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Juilliard, the music school. Well, so you do have a brain under that waitress uniform. What did you study?" Emma hesitated. She hadn't spoken about this in years. "Piano performance." The table went silent. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Piano performance. How fascinating. So you can play. I used to. That was a long time ago. But you studied at Juilliard. That's not something you forget. It's like riding a bike." He paused, then laughed at his own joke. "Well, maybe not the best analogy in your case." His associates looked uncomfortable. One of them, a younger man who seemed less cruel than the others, spoke up. "Marcus, maybe we should just—" "I have an idea," Marcus continued, ignoring him. "We need music. You can play piano. Why don't you entertain us? Give us a little performance." Emma's heart began to race. "I'm working, sir. I have other tables to attend to. I'll make it worth your while." Marcus pulled out his wallet and placed $500 bills on the table. $500. Just play for 10 minutes. Something classical. Show us what Juilliard teaches." The money sat there crisp and green. Emma's mind calculated quickly. $500 was almost what she made in a week. That money could pay for Lily's winter coat, the one she had been putting off buying. It could cover the electric bill that was coming due. It could give them a cushion for once. But the cost wasn't just financial. It was emotional. It meant walking to that piano, sitting at the bench, touching keys for the first time in 5 years, exposing herself, risking failure in front of a room full of strangers. "I don't think that's a good idea," Emma said quietly. "Why not?" "Ashamed that you can't do it anymore. Afraid that without 2 good legs, you've lost your touch." Marcus's voice was mocking. "Or maybe you were never that good to begin with. Maybe Juilliard was a charity case." Something inside Emma cracked. She had endured the comments about her leg. She had swallowed the humiliation. But questioning her talent, her years of work, her identity as a musician, that was different. That touched the wound that had never healed. "It's not about my legs," Emma said, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. "It's about respect, something you clearly don't understand." Marcus's smile faded. "Excuse me, you heard me. You've spent the entire evening treating me and everyone else here like we're beneath you. Like service workers aren't real people with real lives. You think your money gives you the right to be cruel. But it doesn't. You're just a bully with a bigger bank account." The dining room had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching now. Thomas had appeared from the kitchen, his face pale. Emma knew she was probably about to be fired. Knew she had just made a massive mistake. But the words kept coming. "I did study at Juilliard. I was good. Really good. I had a future in music until a drunk driver took it away from me. And yes, I work as a waitress now because I have a daughter to feed and bills to pay. But that doesn't make me less than you. It doesn't give you permission to mock my disability or question my worth." Marcus stood up, his face red. "How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Emma said. "You're the kind of man who mistakes wealth for character, who thinks power means you can hurt people without consequences, who has probably never been told the truth because everyone around you is too afraid of losing their job." "I want her fired," Marcus said, turning to Thomas. "Immediately. This is unacceptable." Thomas looked torn. Emma was one of his best servers, but Marcus was a regular customer who brought in significant business. The calculation was playing out on his face. Before he could speak, Emma made the decision for him. "I'll play," she said. Marcus turned back to her, surprised. "What, I'll play your piano? 10 minutes like you asked, but not for your money." She looked at the bills on the table with disgust. "For myself. Because I haven't let myself touch a piano in 5 years, and maybe it's time I stopped being afraid." The walk from Marcus's table to the piano felt longer than any journey Emma had ever taken. Her prosthetic leg seemed heavier with each step. She was aware of everyone watching. The servers had stopped working. The kitchen staff had emerged to see what was happening. Every customer in the dining room had turned in their seats. Emma's mind was a chaos of thoughts. What was she doing? She hadn't practiced in 5 years. Her technique would be rusty. Her muscle memory might have faded. And the pedals, could she even control them anymore? The prosthetic leg was sophisticated with a responsive foot mechanism, but it wasn't the same as flesh and bone. It didn't have the same sensitivity. She thought about Lily. What would her daughter think if she saw her mother backing down from a challenge Emma had spent years telling Lily to be brave, to stand up for herself, to never let anyone make her feel small because of what others thought? Now it was time to practice what she preached. She thought about the accident, about waking up in the hospital, about the months of physical therapy learning to walk again, about the moment the doctor told her that her performing career was over, about the night she had cried in her mother's arms and said she didn't know who she was anymore if she wasn't a pianist. She thought about the piano that sat in her mother's living room, untouched and silent. About the times she had run her hand along its surface but couldn't bring herself to sit down. About the dreams that still haunted her sleep, where she was on stage performing whole and complete. She thought about Marcus Rothwell sitting at his table with his smug smile and his expensive scotch, about all the people in her life who had underestimated her, who had seen the prosthetic leg and assumed she was fragile, limited, less than she had been before. And she thought about music. God, she had missed it. Not just the playing, but the feeling. The way the world disappeared when her fingers touched the keys. The way emotion translated directly into sound. The way she could tell stories without words, paint pictures without colors, touch souls without speaking. She reached the piano. It was beautiful. A black Steinway Model D, the kind of instrument she had dreamed of owning someday. Someone had closed the lid, so she lifted it carefully, revealing the keys. They gleamed in the restaurant's warm light ivory and ebony weighting. Emma sat down on the bench, adjusted her position. The prosthetic leg felt awkward, mechanical. She extended it toward the pedals, testing. The sustain pedal was on the right, the one she would need to control with her prosthetic foot. She pressed down experimentally. It moved, but she couldn't feel it the way she used to. Couldn't sense the exact degree of pressure, the subtle gradations that created different levels of resonance. Panic fluttered in her chest. What if she couldn't do this? What if 5 years away had erased her ability? What if she sat here and produced nothing but clumsy noise, proving Marcus right, proving that she was just a washed-up former student who couldn't hack it anymore? Her hands hovered over the keys. They were trembling. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then another. And another. In the silence, a memory surfaced. She was 7 years old at her first recital. She had been so nervous she thought she might throw up. Her teacher, Mrs. Chen, had knelt beside her backstage and taken her small hands. "The music is inside you," Mrs. Chen had said. "It doesn't live in your hands. It lives in your heart. Your hands are just the messengers. So stop worrying about your hands and listen to your heart." Emma had walked on stage that day and played flawlessly. Not because her technique was perfect, she was only 7 after all, but because she had stopped thinking and started feeling. Listen to your heart. Emma let her hands drop to the keys. She didn't think about which piece to play. She just let her fingers find their way. And they found Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat, Major Opus 9, Number 2. One of the most beautiful pieces ever written. One of the pieces she had performed in her Juilliard audition a lifetime ago. The first notes were tentative. Her fingers felt stiff, unpracticed. But muscle memory is a powerful thing. It lives deeper than conscious thought. It lives in the body itself. And after 5 years of silence, Emma's body remembered. The opening measures of Chopin's Nocturne filled the dining room. It's a piece that begins quietly, almost whispered. A simple melody in the right hand supported by gentle arpeggios in the left. Emma's fingers moved across the keys, and with each note, something inside her began to unlock. The rust was there. She could feel it. Her technique wasn't as crisp as it had been. There were small hesitations, moments where her fingers didn't move as quickly as her mind commanded. But beneath the imperfection, the music was still there. Still alive. Still hers. The Nocturne requires the sustain pedal almost constantly. It's what gives the piece its dreamy, flowing quality. Emma's prosthetic foot found the pedal, and she pressed down. The sensation was strange, mediated through metal and plastic rather than nerve and bone. She couldn't feel the exact pressure, couldn't sense the subtle resistance. She had to rely on her hearing, on the sound of the piano's resonance, to judge whether she was pressing too hard or not hard enough. The first few measures were tentative because of this. The pedaling was imprecise, causing some notes to blur together more than they should have. But Emma adjusted. She listened more carefully. She learned in real time how much pressure the prosthetic could deliver, how to compensate for the lack of feeling. The audience in the restaurant didn't notice these small imperfections. They heard only the beauty, the melody that rose and fell like breathing, the harmonies that shifted and resolved in ways that tugged at something deep inside the chest. This was music that spoke to longing, to loss, to love, that existed in memory rather than presence. Emma's eyes were closed now. She was no longer in the restaurant. She was back in the practice rooms at Juilliard, where she had spent 10,000 hours of her life. She was in the concert hall where she had performed her senior recital to a standing ovation. She was in her childhood home playing for her mother while dinner cooked in the kitchen. She was everywhere music had ever taken her, which was everywhere that mattered. The piece builds gradually. Chopin wrote it to unfold slowly, each section adding complexity and emotional depth. Emma's right hand played the melody, while her left hand created the harmonic foundation, the two working together in that mysterious alchemy that makes piano performance so extraordinary. 10 fingers, 88 keys, infinite possibilities. She reached the middle section, where the melody climbs into the higher register, and the accompaniment becomes more elaborate. This was where her years of training showed. Despite the rust, despite the time away, her hands knew what to do. They found the notes without thinking. They shaped phrases without conscious decision. They made music. In the audience, people had stopped eating entirely. Forks rested on plates. Wine glasses sat untouched. Conversations had died completely. There was only the piano, only Chopin, only this moment. Thomas, the manager, stood near the kitchen entrance with tears in his eyes. He had known Emma for 3 years and had never suspected she had this inside her. Grace, the bartender, leaned against the bar, her hand over her mouth. The other servers had gathered at the edges of the room, watching one of their own do something impossible. And at his table, Marcus Rothwell sat frozen. The smile had long since left his face. His associates weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at Emma, the woman he had mocked, the waitress with the prosthetic leg, whom he had called a cripple. She was making music that none of them could have imagined. She was proving every assumption he had made completely, devastatingly wrong. Emma continued playing, unaware of all of this. Or perhaps not unaware, but unconcerned. The audience didn't matter in this moment. The performance wasn't for them. It was for her. It was 5 years of grief pouring out through her fingertips. It was every tear she had cried, every dream she had buried, every time she had walked past a piano and forced herself to keep walking. The music swelled. Chopin's Nocturne has moments of incredible tenderness and moments of surprising power. Emma played them all. Her right hand sang the melody while her left hand supported it with rolling arpeggios. Her prosthetic foot controlled the sustain pedal, and she had found the rhythm now, the exact pressure needed. The sound was beautiful. Not perfect perfection wasn't the point. Beautiful. She reached the climactic section where the melody reaches its highest point and the emotion peaks. This is the moment in the piece where everything Chopin was feeling, the longing, the nostalgia, the bittersweet acceptance, comes together. Emma played it with everything she had. The piano rang out, filling every corner of the restaurant, and for a few measures, everyone in that room felt exactly what she was feeling. Then, as Chopin intended, the music began to descend. The melody came back down to earth. The intensity softened. The piece moved toward its quiet conclusion, like a story that knows its ending and wants to savor the final moments. Emma's hands slowed. The notes became sparse again, returning to the simplicity of the opening. Her left hand played the final arpeggios. Her right hand played the last statement of the melody. And then, with a final gentle chord, the piece ended. She held the sustain pedal down, letting the notes fade naturally into silence. The sound hung in the air for a long moment, then gradually disappeared. Emma sat at the piano with her eyes still closed, her hands still on the keys. She was breathing hard, as if she had just run a marathon. In a way she had. She had run 5 years in 10 minutes. She had crossed a distance she thought was uncrossable. She had come home. The silence that followed the last note of Chopin was complete. No one moved. No one spoke. It was the kind of silence that follows something profound, when the audience needs a moment to return to themselves, to remember where they are and who they are. Emma opened her eyes slowly. Her vision was blurred with tears. She hadn't realized she was crying until now. She looked down at her hands, still resting on the keys, and felt a wave of emotion so intense she thought she might drown in it. She had played. After 5 years of running, of hiding, of convincing herself that this part of her life was over, she had played. And it had felt like breathing after holding your breath for so long, you'd forgotten what oxygen tasted like. The silence stretched on. 3 seconds, 4, 5. Emma began to panic. Had it been terrible? Had she embarrassed herself? Were people silent out of pity or second-hand shame? Then someone started clapping. It was Grace, the bartender. Her applause was tentative at first, almost questioning, as if she wasn't sure it was appropriate. But then Thomas joined in. Then the servers. Then, like a wave building from the back of the ocean, the entire dining room erupted. The applause was thunderous. People weren't just clapping politely the way audiences do when they're being courteous. They were on their feet, a standing ovation. Customers who had come for an expensive meal and nothing more were standing and applauding a waitress who had just played a single piano piece. Emma turned on the bench, stunned. The tears were flowing freely now. She saw faces she had served countless times, looking at her with awe. She saw Thomas with his hand over his heart. She saw Grace jumping up and down, whooping. She saw the line cooks who had come out of the kitchen, their white coats stained with the evening's work, applauding hard enough to hurt their hands. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The adrenaline was fading, and in its place came a trembling weakness. She had used every ounce of energy she had. She felt hollowed out, empty, raw. One of the servers, a young woman named Jessica, rushed over with a glass of water. "That was incredible," she said, her voice breaking. "Emma, I had no idea. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Emma took the water with shaking hands and drank. The applause continued. It seemed like it would never stop. She wanted to say something to thank them, but her voice wouldn't work. She just nodded, overwhelmed. Slowly, the applause began to fade. People returned to their seats. Conversations started up again, though now they were all about what they had just witnessed. Emma heard fragments as she sat at the piano trying to collect herself. "Did you know she could play like that, Julia?" "Juilliard," she said. "Can you imagine? Makes you think about all the talented people out there just trying to get by. I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life." Emma finally managed to stand. Her prosthetic leg felt strange, as if the connection between her body and the mechanism had been disrupted by the intensity of what she had just done. She steadied herself against the piano, then began the long walk back to the kitchen. She didn't look at Marcus's table. Couldn't. She had done what she needed to do for herself. His reaction didn't matter. At least that's what she told herself. But Emma's performance wasn't finished. As she walked away from the piano, Thomas intercepted her. His face was flushed with emotion. Emma, that was extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. But he hesitated, looking uncomfortable. But what? There are several customers who would like to hear more, including... He glanced toward Marcus's table. Mr. Rothwell has requested that you play another piece. Emma's stomach tightened. I need to get back to work. My tables, I've had other servers cover your section. Please, just one more piece. I've never seen anything like what just happened in there. The atmosphere, the energy, this is special. Emma wanted to refuse. She wanted to collect her tips, clock out, go home to Lily, and process what had just happened in private. But she could see the pleading in Thomas's eyes. He was a good manager, kind to his staff, and he had stood up for her against Marcus earlier. She owed him this. One more piece, she said. Then I really do need to check on my daughter. She returned to the piano. The walk was easier this time. She sat down, adjusted her position, and considered what to play. Chopin had been the right choice for breaking the seal, for remembering what it felt like to create music. But now she wanted something more challenging. Something that would push her, that would demand everything her hands and her adapted technique could give. She decided on Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto. Number 2. The opening of the third movement. It's one of the most technically demanding pieces in the piano repertoire, requiring speed, precision, and extraordinary pedal control. Emma had performed it at Juilliard, back when her body was whole, and her confidence was unshakable. Could she do it now? There was only one way to find out. She began. The opening is explosive, a cascade of notes that rushes down the keyboard like water over rocks. Emma's fingers flew. The rust was still there, the slight imprecision, but the basic skill remained. Her hands remembered the patterns, the fingerings, the way the phrases connected. But then came the challenge. Rachmaninoff's piano writing requires constant pedal changes. The sustain pedal has to be released and repressed, sometimes multiple times per measure, creating clarity while maintaining the rich, romantic sound the composer intended. This is difficult enough with a natural foot. With a prosthetic, it bordered on impossible. Emma's prosthetic foot moved to the pedal. She tried to execute the rapid changes the music required. Press-release. Press-release. But she couldn't feel when the pedal was fully released. Couldn't sense the exact moment to press again. The first few measures were muddy, the notes blurring together in ways that obscured the melodic line. She felt panic rising. This was it. This was where the limitation of her body would show. This was where she would fail. But Emma had spent 5 years learning to adapt, learning to live in a body that didn't work the way it used to, learning to do daily tasks that required adjustments, creativity workarounds. Why should music be any different? She changed her approach. Instead of trying to replicate the pedal technique she had used before the accident, she invented a new one. She used shallower pedal presses, creating a different kind of resonance. She compensated with her hands, using touch and dynamics to create the clarity that the pedal couldn't provide. She listened even more carefully to the sound, using her ears to guide what her foot couldn't feel. It took several measures, but gradually she found it. A new technique. Not the same as before, but effective. Different, but beautiful. The music cleared. The cascade of notes became crisp and articulate. Emma's confidence surged. She played faster, pushing herself. Her left hand crossed over her right to reach the lower registers. Her right hand raced up to the highest notes on the keyboard. The piano sang. This was harder than Chopin. More technically demanding. More physically exhausting. But Emma discovered something in those moments of struggle. Her disability didn't make her unable. It made her creative. It forced her to find new solutions, new approaches. And sometimes those new approaches led to something unexpected. Something original. The audience was mesmerized. They could see the intensity on Emma's face, the way her body moved with the music, the sheer physicality of what she was doing. They could hear the virtuosity in the rapid passages, the emotion in the lyrical sections. They were witnessing not just a performance, but a triumph. Emma reached the climax of the section she had chosen to play. A series of powerful chords that rang out like bells. She played them with everything she had, her whole body involved in the act of making sound. And then, with a final crashing chord, she stopped. This time the applause started immediately. No pause, no silence, just an explosion of appreciation. The standing ovation was even more enthusiastic than before. People were shouting, cheering. Emma heard someone whistle. It was surreal. She stood and bowed slightly, still overwhelmed, still not quite believing this was happening. 5 years. 5 years of silence, and now this. It felt like a dream. Like she might wake up any moment in her small apartment getting ready for another shift and realize none of it had been real. But it was real. The applause was real. The piano behind her was real. The tears on her face were real. The feeling in her chest, that expansion of something she thought had died, was real. As the applause died down again, and Emma turned to leave the piano for the second time, a voice stopped her. Wait. It was Marcus Rothwell. He had stood up from his table and was walking toward her. Emma's body tensed. She didn't know what to expect. More cruelty, more mockery. A final humiliation to cap off the evening. But when Marcus reached her, his face looked different. The arrogance was gone. The smug smile had disappeared. He looked older somehow, and his eyes were red. That was... He paused, struggling for words. I need to apologize. Emma said nothing. Just waited. Everything I said tonight. The way I treated you. The things I called you. Marcus's voice was rough. There's no excuse. I was cruel. I was a bully. And you just showed everyone here that I was also completely, utterly wrong. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Started to take out money. Emma held up her hand. I don't want your money. Please, it's the least I can do. I insulted you. I demeaned you. I said, I don't want your money. Emma's voice was firm. An apology means nothing if you're trying to buy your way out of guilt. Marcus put the wallet away. He looked lost, like a man who had always been able to solve problems with his checkbook, and suddenly found himself in a situation where money was meaningless. I don't know what to say, he admitted. I treated you like you were less than human, and you responded by creating something beautiful, something I could never do in 1,000 lifetimes. You humbled me, completely. Emma studied his face. She had spent years being angry at people like Marcus, people who judged her, who saw only her disability, who made assumptions about her worth. But standing here now, seeing genuine remorse in his eyes, she felt the anger beginning to loosen. Why, she asked. Why were you so cruel? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I had a younger brother. Daniel. He was born with cerebral palsy. Couldn't walk without crutches. Couldn't do most of the things other kids could do. And I was ashamed of him. I was a teenager worried about my reputation, my social status. I didn't want to be seen with him. Didn't want to be known as the kid with the disabled brother. He paused, swallowing hard. Daniel died when he was 16. Heart complications. And I never told him I was sorry. Never told him that I loved him despite being too embarrassed to show it. He died thinking I was ashamed of him. Because I was. Tears were running down Marcus's face now. He didn't bother wiping them away. I've spent 30 years becoming successful, making money, building an empire. And I've spent 30 years being exactly the kind of person who would have mocked Daniel. Exactly the kind of person I hated when I was a kid. I see someone with a disability, and instead of compassion, I feel this ugly need to prove I'm superior. To put them down. It's like I'm still trying to distance myself from Daniel even though he's been dead for decades. Emma felt something shift inside her. Anger was easy. Anger was simple. But understanding was more complicated. It didn't excuse Marcus's behavior, but it explained it. And sometimes explanation was a form of healing. Your brother would have wanted you to be better than this, Emma said quietly. It's not too late to become the person he deserved as a brother. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. I accept your apology, Emma continued. But apologizing to me isn't enough. You need to think about how you treat people. Not just people with disabilities, but everyone you consider beneath you. Service workers, employees, anyone who doesn't have your money or your power. If you really want to honor Daniel, start treating people with dignity. I will, Marcus said. I promise I will. He extended his hand. Emma looked at it for a moment, then shook it. His grip was firm but not aggressive. Just human. There's something else, Marcus said. I meant what I said about wanting to help. Not as a way to assuage my guilt, but because I think the world deserves to hear you play. I know people. Music people. I could make some calls, get you auditions, maybe even a recording contract. You're too talented to spend your life serving tables. Emma felt the offer like a weight. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. This was everything she had wanted 5 years ago. A second chance, a way back into the world of music. But something made her hesitate. Can I think about it? Of course. Here's my card. Call me anytime. Marcus handed her a business card, then returned to his table. His associates were quiet, subdued. The celebration they had come for had turned into something else entirely. Emma stood alone by the piano, Marcus's business card in her hand. The restaurant had returned to something resembling normalcy. Customers were finishing their meals. Servers were clearing tables. But there was still an electric feeling in the air, a sense that something significant had happened. Thomas approached her. Take the rest of the night off, he said. With pay. You've more than earned it. Thank you, Emma said. She went to the break room, changed out of her uniform, and collected her things. Grace was waiting for her by the employee entrance. You okay? Grace asked. I don't know, Emma admitted. I don't know what I am. You're a badass, that's what you are. Grace hugged her fiercely. I've worked with you for 3 years and I never knew. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because it hurt too much to talk about. It felt like a whole other life, a life that belonged to someone else. But it didn't belong to someone else. It belonged to you, and it still does. Emma nodded slowly. I think I'm starting to realize that. She took the L train home, the business card still in her pocket. Her mind was racing. Marcus's offer was incredible. He had the connections to open doors that were closed to most people. He could give her back her career? But did she want it back? The same career, the same path, just delayed by 5 years. She arrived home to find her mother watching TV with Lily already asleep on the couch. Her mother took one look at Emma's face and knew something had happened. "Tell me," she said. Emma told her everything. The confrontation with Marcus, the decision to play, the 2 performances, the apology, the offer. When she finished, her mother was crying. "I'm so proud of you," her mother said. "I always knew you'd find your way back to music. I've been waiting 5 years for you to be ready. I don't know if I'm ready even now. I don't know what I want." Her mother took her hands. "Then don't decide tonight. But Emma, listen to me. What happened tonight wasn't just about proving that man wrong. It was about you remembering who you are, not who you were before the accident, who you are now. A woman who has survived incredible pain, who has raised a beautiful daughter, who has worked hard and stayed strong, and yes, a woman who can make extraordinary music." Emma looked at Lily sleeping peacefully, her small face relaxed. She thought about the years of sacrifice, the double shifts, the tired feet, the customers who were rude and customers who were kind, the life she had built one day at a time from the wreckage of her dreams. "I think," Emma said slowly, "I think I don't want to go back to the old path. Concert halls and recording contracts and international tours. That was a different Emma's dream. I'm not her anymore." "Then what do you want?" Emma thought about the feeling of playing tonight. Not the performance aspect, not the applause, but the actual act of making music, of sharing something beautiful, of using her gift. "I want to teach," she said. "I want to open a studio, teach kids who love music the way I did. And especially," she paused, the idea forming even as she spoke, "especially kids with disabilities. Kids who've been told they can't. Kids who need someone to show them that different doesn't mean impossible." Her mother smiled. "That sounds perfect. But I don't have the money to start a studio. I barely make rent as it is." "Then maybe you take Marcus's help. Not to resurrect your performing career, but to start your teaching career. Let him fund a studio. Let him help you help others. Turn his guilt into something good." Emma considered this. It felt right in a way that going back to performing didn't. "I'll call him tomorrow." She carried Lily to bed, tucking her in carefully. Lily stirred, opened her eyes halfway. "Mom." "Yeah, baby. I heard Grandma say you played piano tonight." "I did. Can you play for me sometime?" Emma felt tears spring to her eyes again. It seemed like all she had done tonight was cry. "Yeah, I can play for you. I promise. Love you, Mom. Love you too, Lily." Emma returned to the living room. Her mother had gone to bed. She sat alone in the quiet apartment, Marcus's card on the table in front of her. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands. 5 years ago, her life had ended. At least that's what it had felt like. The accident had taken her leg, her career, her identity. She had spent 5 years grieving for the person she used to be, for the dreams she used to have, for the future that had been stolen from her. But tonight, something had shifted. She had played again, and the world hadn't ended. Her technique wasn't what it used to be. Her pedal control was different. Her body had changed. But the music was still there. The gift was still there. It had just been waiting for her to be ready to claim it again. She wasn't the old Emma. That Emma was gone, and no amount of wishing would bring her back. But this Emma, the one who had survived, who had adapted, who had learned to live in a body that didn't work the way it used to, this Emma was pretty remarkable too. This Emma had strength the old one had never needed, had perspective the old one hadn't earned, had compassion born from suffering. And this Emma could still make beautiful music. 6 months later, on a warm spring morning, Emma Martinez opened the door to her new piano studio. It was a small space, just 2 rooms in a converted brownstone on the north side of Chicago. But it was hers. 3 pianos filled the space. One was her old upright from her mother's house, finally brought out of storage. The other 2 were generous donations from Marcus Rothwell, who had been true to his word. He had funded the studio's startup costs, purchased instruments, and even helped with marketing. He hadn't done it for publicity or recognition. He had done it quietly, almost anonymously. His way of making amends. Emma had 7 students now. 4 of them had disabilities. There was Miguel, a 12-year-old with limited use of his left hand after a surgery complication. Emma was teaching him how to adapt pieces for one hand, how to use his right hand to create fullness that compensated for what the left couldn't do. There was Aria, a 10-year-old, who was blind. Emma taught her by touch and sound, helping her memorize pieces through repetition and feel. Aria was already performing at her school. There was Joshua, a 14-year-old in a wheelchair who couldn't use the pedals at all. Emma was teaching him how to create expression purely through touch, how to make the piano sing without sustain. And there was Lily. 8 years old, bright and determined, taking lessons from her mother 3 times a week. Lily didn't have a disability, but she had something just as valuable proof that dreams could survive even when they seemed dead. Emma still worked part-time at the Grand Oak. Not because she needed to, the studio was starting to support itself, but because she wanted to. She liked Thomas. She liked Grace. She liked the routine. And honestly, she liked remembering where she had come from. It kept her grounded. Marcus Rothwell came by the studio once a month, never during lesson times, just quiet visits where he would sit and listen to Emma practice, or talk about his life, or share stories about Daniel. He was different now, softer. He had started a foundation that provided scholarships for music students with disabilities. He had become a major donor to several disability rights organizations. He was trying. Every day, he was trying to be better. On this particular morning, Emma was preparing for a recital. Her students would perform for their families and friends. Miguel had chosen a piece he had adapted himself. Aria would play from memory. Joshua had selected something slow and expressive that didn't need pedals, and Lily would close the show with a Chopin waltz. Emma was nervous for them, but also proud. These kids had worked so hard, had overcome so much, had proven that music belonged to everyone, not just those with perfect bodies. As she arranged chairs and tested the pianos, making sure they were in tune, Emma caught sight of her reflection in the window. She was wearing a dress that showed her prosthetic leg. No pants to hide it. No shame about it. Just part of who she was. She thought about that night at the Grand Oak. About Marcus's cruelty. About her decision to play. About the feeling of keys under her fingers after 5 years of absence. It felt like a lifetime ago, and also like yesterday. That night had changed her life. But not in the way she expected. She hadn't become famous, hadn't recorded albums or toured internationally, hadn't returned to the path she was on before the accident. Instead, she had found a new path, one that was more meaningful than the old one ever could have been. She was teaching. She was sharing. She was showing kids that different didn't mean less, that adaptation was a form of strength, that dreams could take new shapes and still be beautiful. The doorbell rang. Her first student had arrived. Emma smiled and went to greet them, ready to begin another day of making music, creating possibility, and proving that the human spirit, like the human body, was endlessly capable of adaptation, resilience, and grace. So what's the lesson in Emma's story? What's the takeaway that applies to all of us, whether we're musicians or not, whether we have disabilities or not? It's this: we are so much more than our circumstances, more than our limitations, more than the worst things that have happened to us. We are not defined by what we've lost, but by how we choose to move forward with what remains. Emma lost her leg and her career. She lost the future she had planned, the identity she had claimed, the dreams she had nurtured. And for 5 years, she let that loss define her. She ran from music because it reminded her of everything she wasn't anymore. But that night, at the Grand Oak, she made a different choice. She chose to face her fear. To sit at the piano, despite not knowing if she could still play. To adapt instead of surrendering. To create beauty in a body that no longer worked the way it used to. And in doing so, she discovered something crucial: her gift hadn't disappeared. It had just been waiting for her to be ready, waiting for her to stop mourning who she used to be and start becoming who she was meant to be. We all have losses. We all have limitations. We all have moments when life breaks us and we wonder if we'll ever be whole again. But wholeness isn't about being perfect. It's about being authentic. It's about using what we have instead of grieving what we've lost. Emma's prosthetic leg didn't make her a worse pianist. It made her a different kind of pianist. One who had to be more creative, more adaptive, more intentional. And those qualities, creativity, adaptation, intention, made her a better teacher, made her more compassionate, made her capable of helping others in ways the old Emma never could have. So the next time you see someone and make an assumption about their limitations, remember Emma. Remember that hidden beneath visible differences are depths of talent, strength, and possibility that you can't see from the outside. And if you're someone dealing with your own limitations, your own losses, your own broken dreams, remember this: you are not finished. Your story is not over. There is music still inside you waiting to be played. All you have to do is find the courage to sit down at the piano one more time and trust that your hands still remember what your heart has always known. Dreams don't die. They transform. They adapt. They become new versions of themselves, shaped by experience and hardened by struggle into something more valuable than they were before. Emma Martinez walked into that restaurant, a waitress with a prosthetic leg, and walked out a teacher with a purpose. The only thing that changed was her willingness to remember who she really was. So who are you really? What gift have you buried? What dream have you abandoned? What music is waiting inside you, silent and patient for the moment you're finally ready to play? The piano is waiting. The audience is waiting. Your life is waiting. All you have to do is begin.